Hello everyone and welcome in this new video. So today what I wanted to do is to show a concrete example of ngrok and rancher. So following the webinar we did with ngrok to discuss about how rancher and ngrok can fit together. So I would like to demonstrate in the context of running containers in Kubernetes clusters how you could benefit from ngrok and rancher with very easy and concrete examples. Before we begin making the actual demonstration, just wanted to make sure that everyone is aligned and knows about ngrok and rancher. So ngrok is a company that is providing a platform to help development teams to provide network connectivity to their application and a lot of stuff on top of this. And it's usually where it's kind of complicated for development teams to do. And even in some particular cases, it's a good way to easily give access to something that can be protected in a network. So very interesting. And rancher is a component, an application that's goal is to manage Kubernetes clusters. So it's provided by the company SUSE. It's open source. And it's a cloud native application, so it will run in a container. And the goal is really to have a layer to easily manage multiple Kubernetes clusters. And on top of this, provide a lot of services to the different teams and at the same time, control everything from an operational point of view. So let's get concrete. What do I want to do in my demonstration today? There are two things. The first thing is to be able to run rancher. And the second one is obviously to get access to it. So to do this, we need an infrastructure and we need a Kubernetes cluster. For the infrastructure, just for me, because it was easier to set up, I will use something running on Azure, the public cloud provided by Microsoft. And on it, I will create a cluster managed by Azure, which is called AKS. For this, to be able to install a rancher. But this is not the important part. The important part is the use case where I've got an infrastructure, I've got a cluster, and then I want to install rancher and make it available potentially on internet. And this is where it can become quite complicated sometimes. And in addition to this, I want obviously to have HTTPS with a valid certificate. And you will see why ngrok can really help a lot on this. So let's start by creating the cluster. Here I'm on the Azure portal. Obviously I do it for the demonstration purpose, but in a real world I will use Terraform or some other infrastructure as code tooling. But here you can see, so I'm logged on Azure. I can see my account and everything. I have access to a subscription, so I can create a resource. And in Azure, I selected AKS, so Kubernetes Services, and I click on Create New. On it, I decide to choose a resource group. I choose a preset configuration. So for me, it's really for testing, so I will choose the one that is that has the lower price and also lower consumption. You can see here not a lot of stuff. I didn't change. I just put the name. Here I got agent pool. On this, you can decide to choose another one. For me, it's something I will delete quickly after this video, so I don't care really much on it. And then, okay, just matter up. Just for this, tac. For the network policy, I'll leave Calico. I could choose something else if I wanted. And I don't need anything on this. Should be good. Check. Okay. So validation progress. The reason I'm showing this to you, it's I don't want to hide any complexity, or if you are new to Azure, maybe interesting to see how to reproduce it from scratch. So I've got everything here. So I did just click on create new cluster. I selected the default for everything. The only thing I updated is the name, just because I'm sensitive with the naming convention. So I did make sure it's the right name for me, and I click on create. and we are done. The deployment has been done. The resources is now available. And just for your information, in the location West Europe, it took between 8 to 9 minutes to have the cluster and everything ready. So I can see the deployment in Azure is complete, and I can go to the resource. So here you can have the resource, which is a Kubernetes service managed by Azure, but it's a cluster. So I now have access to a Kubernetes cluster with everything I need to access it. And this is what I will also show you to try to hide anything. If you have a cluster and you are using Azure, you will see that to get the command line that will execute just after, you just have to click on connect and it will give you the different command line. For everything I will do, it needs some requirements locally. What I need is the Azure CLI, because I'm an administrator. I need kubectl, so the Kubernetes CLI, and Helm. So this is all that is needed. It's very basic and can be installed directly from a download, like a binary. You can use a package manager. So there is everything to install it correctly with a safe source to do it. So I will go to the command line, and here the first thing I need is I just created the cluster, so I need to interact with it. The best way to do it like this is using kubectl, so the CLI. But for the kubectl to be able to access and be authenticated and acknowledged by Kubernetes server, we need to have the good information on the URL and different information like certificate to be recognized and authenticated. And to do this, there is a very interesting command line from the Azure CLI, and it's, I think, the only Azure CLI command that I will show you in this demonstration, just to grab the credentials and update locally my kubeconfig file. So I will do it. It's not the first time I do it, so it's merged, but we can see that it has been correctly merged in the kubeconfig, and also it's configured as a default connection. So in the kubeconfig, we have everything, all the configuration for every clusters we are using, but there is a default one. So the default one has been updated to the new cluster I just created, and I can quickly test by making a kubectl get nodes. We can see that 2 nodes, it was indicated in the UI in Azure, and we can see we have the exact version that was also part of the form, and we have the edge. So I took a small break, but it was done indeed 4 hours ago. So I have everything on my side to interact with the cluster. And for example, I can make list all the Helm applications that has been installed. So it's done by Azure by default. It's something that I could have updated and configured, but I wanted to show the default options. So by default, we've got Helm package that has been installed regarding monitoring and metrics. So I'm good. So now, going back to the purpose of my demonstration, it was to show how to install Rancher. So what we will do is to go to the official documentation, so getting started, installation and upgrade, and install upgrade on a Kubernetes cluster. We can see the prerequisites. So we've got a Kubernetes cluster. We don't have an ingress-controller, but we have the CLI tools. Still, we can move on. We'll talk about the ingress-controller just after. Everything will be done through Helm chart. So Helm is very interesting. It's really the package manager of Kubernetes. But on top of this, it can be used to install, upgrade, delete application on a cluster. It's a very nice way to do it. It's really like a package manager that we'll use like on Linux or Windows to install application. It's good to make updates, to remove, to list. Very interesting. It's really the standard in Kubernetes. And this is what we have. So, but to access it, like you've got a repository for packages on Linux, it's the same for Kubernetes. We need to add repositories we trust to reference and install application. So this is what I would do here. I'm adding the Rancher latest one. You can look at the different definition, but for me, I'm fine with the latest one. And to install, I need to create a namespace. A namespace in Kubernetes is a way to organize and isolate workload. Very, very important. And so the one for Rancher is called cattle system. So I will create it. It was already created. But let's say, okay, for the demonstration purposes, I delete it. And I can create it again. So, okay, it's created, I'm good. And then, as many things, and maybe you heard it during the webinar, very easily when you want to publish an application, particular web application, as soon as you want to do it, you are faced to different things to cover, in particular SSL. So you need to make sure it's a safe connection when end users are going through the URL on your application. So we need a certificate, we need a root. And so here we're kind of stuck because I don't want to generate a self-generated certificate. It will not be trusted by end users. For this use case, I don't want to use Let's Encrypt, even if it's a good thing. And I don't have any certificate. And this is where ngrok is so interesting, because I don't have to care about this. I also don't have to care about Cert Manager. Cert Manager is an open source component, very interesting to manage certificates in Kubernetes, but with ngrok, we don't have to care. So very interesting. But still, to make the installation, we still have to work with Ingress. So just for people that are maybe not familiar with it, by default in a cluster, Kubernetes cluster, everything that is running all the workload is not accessible from the external world. And it's a good practice. But how do you make it available? Because for a lot of cases, we want to, like for web application, if we have e-commerce, we need to provide it to external people. So to do this, it's kind of clear in Kubernetes, we need to define an ingress. So an ingress is a resource in Kubernetes where we define, okay, for this specific route, we will accept external traffic on this route, and we will push it to a service. So a service is another resource type in Kubernetes. It's a good way to manage the traffic between different, that will reach potentially different pods. It can be one, it can be multiple. So this is exactly this. And to define an ingress, it's like this. We've got a path, we've got a service, and here we go. So it's something we will define, and when we install Rancher, there will be ingress for Rancher, but an ingress in itself is not doing much. It's just a definition. It's not an actual implementation. To do the actual implementation on the traffic routing, we need what is called an ingress-controller. And in Kubernetes, kind of everything is a controller. So it will be something, a controller is something that is looking at what is supposed to happen, and it will make it happen. So an ingress controller will look at every ingress we create, and every time there is a new ingress, it will make the actual link available. But it's not something that is provided by default by Kubernetes. You will need to install at least one ingress controller. The most famous one is nginx, but you've got traffic, and we've got ngrok, and this is what I want to show you. So to install it, you can look at the documentation using ngrok with Kubernetes, very well made. And we've got the different steps. Everything is can be achieved through the ngrok dashboard, so it's a web UI. And on this, it's very clear. You will get an authentication token, an API, and then we work with domains. And this is what we will do here. So here I am on the ngrok dashboard. I'm recognized. I've got the welcome page, and there is something to ease the first steps. And on this, you can look at the different parts. So what is very interesting for me is the cloud edge part. And if I go in domains, I can see that I've already played with ngrok. So what I will do, I will create a new domain. You can use something that is hosted with the domain of ngrok-3. You can bring your own domain, which is very interesting, which is what I do for my official launcher instance. So for this, I will say, okay, demo. Oops. Okay, so maybe I just need to refresh it. Demo. And I can see it's available. So I will take, let's take this one and everything. So perfect. Say okay, continue. And I can have the information on this. And that's all that is needed for me. I've got my domain that is registered. I'm fine with it. It gives some additional information, but with the ingress-controller, you don't have to care about this. And what I like, it's the TLS certificate will be generated by ngrok. So you can see it's very easy to do. And everything I show here on Rancher on Azure, obviously it's more convenient for me to show you through the web interface, but everything I do here, I could automate it once again with Terraform or any other infrastructure as code tooling. So, but it's better to show it like in a UI. So I can see I've got my domain name that is here. So I can go back in the documentation. So I did everything. I went in the dashboard, I did the domain. I already copied my authentication token and API. I will not show you this, obviously, because it's a secret value. And then I've got some information. The next step will be to install the ingress-controller, and no surprise, I will use Helm to do this. And this is exactly what I will do. So I did already set the variables with my secret values. And what I will do, I will install the ingress-controller. So on this, what I'm just copying and pasting. Up. So going back to the command line, what I do here, I will use a generic secret to host my secret value. So I'm using a secret in this, and I already filled these two values here. But just before, I forgot something important. I didn't create the namespace for the service controller. So I will do it right now. Otherwise, he won't be happy for good reasons. And then I can go back to creating my secrets here. Cool, created. And then I can install my ingress controller. So here I'm using Helm with the name which is by default, which is good for me. I'm using the ngrok repository, M repository. I'm following the doc basically. It's just that I'm using the secret name reference, and here we go. So I can see it doesn't exist, and it's installing it now. Cool. So I've got my ingress controller running. So I'm fine on the ngrok part, at least on this stage, and I can go back to the documentation on Rancher to move forward. So if I go back here on the Rancher documentation. So once again, you can skip the part 3 and part 4. It's really easier with ngrok. And there are different options, and we've got the different layers. So for me, what I will do is to use this one. Just some cleaning. So here, once again, I'm using Helm to install Rancher. So I'm using the Rancher latest repo. the namespace we just created. Oh, there is something I need to change here. And here, what is interesting, so with Helm you can configure. I could set up the default ingress controller, but for this demonstration, I think it was good to show you. So I will specify clearly the ingress controller I want to have. So it's based on the class name. So I will use ingress class name ngrok. TLS external, meaning that Rancher, you don't have to care. This is something I will do on my side. I specify the version, so this is the latest version for Rancher. But here you can see there is a Rancher domain here. So I need to update it. So I need to define it. Oops. So Rancher domain, we just saw that it was this one. So demo -bitoma, up, Rancher domain, and then I can copy paste. So here the same command line, and we say, okay, install. Installing Rancher may take up to a few minutes, so I will jump right away. And we go. We waited a few minutes, we checked everything is okay, and if you want to know how to check it, or the same, it's in the documentation. We can see there's a command line here you can do. Yeah, up. I can see successfully rollout. So I'm good. So it should work. So there are different ways to test it. You can copy paste the URL we define, or even better, I think, it's to use ngrok also for this, because it will detect if it has been correctly assigned by the Kubernetes cluster, and I'm curious to see it in action. So I'm going back to, so documentation is here, and we just, okay. Going back to the dashboard, we were on the domains. We can see the domains were created, and we can see there an endpoint associated. So it's good, because it means that there is a connection between the cluster and our domain with ngrok. So I'm very curious if I go in endpoints here and I click on the link. Oh, cool. I've got Rancher displayed. So this is the default page when we install it from scratch. It's the first time we launch it. So what it say? Okay, use the password that has been automatically generated. And it's kind of nice because I can just copy paste here. Oops. And I got the value. So, and you can try it afterwards. You will see that it won't work, but for me, it will. Just okay. And here, never. I can use a random one. Again, you will be able to try it if you want, but I will make sure it has been updated. And this is really the default phase when you install Rancher. This is the default step for the administrator. Just a few steps, but we can see the URL is fine. This is the one I define, and it's okay for me. And by checking, okay, tack. And here I've got Rancher. So it's kind of huge because I don't know if you followed, but what I did is kind of following the installation step, but by removing a lot of steps. So what I did on the Rancher side is just to one command line with Helm chart to install Rancher. And all the magic, and it's really magic here, all the link between the external world and my cluster and Rancher is done by ngrok. And very easy. You can see that I had to install the ingress-controller, so also one command line, and then I just have to say, okay, use this controller by using the ngrok class name. Just define the domain that I created in ngrok, and voila, it's working. So it's really cool. I hope you will understand how cool it is, but very interesting as a developer because I just have to care about the workload. Which is my stuff. I do create a container image, I do create an Helm chart, I want this to run fine, but afterwards the connectivity and a lot of these issues, the certificates and everything, it's not something I do care and there is value for me. And so if I just show you. Here I've got my URL, and we can see it's HTTPS, so it's good. And if I look at the certificate, connection is secure, and we can see, okay, certificate is valid. So this is great because I didn't have to care, I didn't have to do anything, and I know that's the responsibility of ngrok, so I don't have to care that in the future maybe the certificate will not be valid anymore and I would have to do something. So very interesting for me. I'm very happy for this. And just as we are on Rancher, I can show you how it is. Here, Rancher is all about working with Kubernetes clusters and managing Kubernetes clusters and workload. So by default, you will see the local cluster, which is the cluster on which Rancher is deployed. But what is good is we can use Rancher to look at the cluster where Rancher is running. So this is very cool. And we can have a look. So by default, we only have user namespace, so I want to show you everything, so I do select it. There are some information. We can see that we've got the two nodes we define on AKS. We can see that in terms of resource, we are kind of good. I should have reduced it, but just for this test, and I will delete the cluster afterwards, that's fine. And we can see some events, really the focus on Rancher as for ngrok is developer experience. So the goal here is to go straight to the point. We need some information, it will be displayed here. And if I look at the workload, in particular for me the deployments, I can see everything that has been installed. So I don't know if you remember, I talked about Calico, so it has been installed. We've got Fleet, which is the GitOps tool that is provided by default by Rancher, and the one from SUSE. We've got KPI Control Manager, we've got some stuff related to Rancher, so we can see Rancher. From Rancher, we can see Rancher in the Catal system namespace. I don't know if you remember, it's the namespace I created manually. And then there are some stuff on kubesystem, so this is really Kubernetes. We can see also from Kubernetes what is running, so core DNS, the metrics part, which was installed by Azure by default. And here I've got my little friend ingress-controller. So this is so cool because here I've got everything, and you can see there are not much, and also Tiger operator for the networking part, but it's really cool because we can see Rancher and ingress-controller. And what I like, but it's not the purpose to go far in Rancher, but this is really what I like. If I go I go around in Rancher, I can see the different pods. I can look at the logs, which is so cool. And what is very interesting with really what I like a lot with Rancher is you have access to everything. If we compare, for example, with the Azure portal for AKS, it has been improved over the years. It's good, but it's not complete. You don't have everything. And Azure, as any cloud provider, is focused on the infrastructure part. So it's good at this for the authentication, for displaying information, for working with it. Rancher is dedicated, is a tool for Kubernetes cluster. So everything you will define will be in the Kubernetes world. So it's much better, like for example, to give access for the airbag part, it's dedicated to Kubernetes. So all the permission, role, and everything is focused on Kubernetes. So it makes a lot of sense. It's much better that looking at the permission, like in Azure, to say, okay, I need to provide the developer an access, but what are the right permission and everything? So no, you don't have to care. Also, it's agnostic. Whatever the provider behind, on-prem, cloud, private, and everything, it will be the same interface. So it's very, very nice. And we can look at the logs, which is cool. You can even execute a command. And what I like a lot, because I don't have a huge memory, like for example, if I forget what did I install, here I've got everything for the service discovery. So I can see the service, cool. But what is interesting for me, I can see the ingress, and it's so cool because here I've got the link and I can go back on it. So this is pretty much what I wanted to show you, and just give you a glimpse of what you can do with Rancher and ngrok, and it's really a great combination because with Rancher you have this layer, interesting layer and powerful layer that you put on top of your infrastructure. So it's agnostic of what is behind. It's an abstraction and it's focused on Kubernetes. And this is what we need when we give access to a development team. We give access to a Kubernetes cluster. We don't want to give access directly to an infrastructure. But at the same time, we need to expose this workload to the external world, and it can be very complicated. DNS registries, certificates, all of this fuss, and we can use ngrok for this. And you can even see that to install Rancher, it's much easier with ngrok than the default. And just as a goodie, I will also show another type of workload, an application. It's the one that is suggested in the quick start from ngrok, and it's kind of fun, I think, to do it. So if I go back to the documentation, here we can see there is a game. I don't know if you played this game, so I spent quite a lot of time on it, but it's kind of fun because we can use it. So here there is an example provided by ngrok where you can actually have a small workload, very easy to install. And here we can see there are the definitions. So it's YAML manifest. Maybe you're not familiar, but it's an easy way to define very specifically what we want to have. So basically it will be a game, so based on this particular container image. And to be able to access it, we have a service and ingress. So that's kind of all we need to make it run. So I don't know if you remember, so before applying this, I need to create a domain so ngrok can make the link. I'm going back to the dashboard. Yeah, what I will do, again, I will go to domain, I will create a new domain. So I will say, okay, game. Oops. And I can see, oh, cool, the ngrok app is available, so I will take it for me. So I'm good, I've got everything I need. Yeah, thanks. And here, so going back to the command line, here, oops, I define the new ngrok domain. For this one, I want to isolate, so I will create a new namespace called demo. And I will push this content here. So what I did, just to be able to do it from the command line directly, I copy-paste what was provided by ngrok, and you can see I put it in this YAML file. And what I do is just a basic sed to replace the ingress class name with ngrok, with our ingress controller, and with the domain. So here we go. So we can see I've got the service deployment ingress. And now, how can I check it's working fine? And for this, we will going back to Rancher, because this is exactly the purpose of Rancher. If I go back here, we can see that the page, I didn't refresh anything. I can see that the ingress has been detected and it did make the link with the service. So we can go follow the right rabbit. We can see it's running, it's cool. And I can see also in the service that, okay, the pod is running fine. I can look at it, I can view the logs, and there is no log, so I guess it's okay. Yeah, so I go back to ingress and I will open it. And it's working. Cool. So I can show you. Yes, it's with the arrow key. So I can demonstrate. I'm very bad at this game, but it's kind of fun. And this is it. So I don't know if you can see how powerful it is, because with ngrok, so easy to make the link, and with Rancher, so easy to see what's wrong. So that's pretty much I wanted to share with you. I will share the links and everything. As usual, I will be very happy to have your feedback, comment and everything. And if you think of something else that we can play with Rancher, with ngrok, feel free to make a comment. Thank you.